to order at 6:32. And can we have a roll call? Now, when
Hope
Chuck's
you want
on,
to do that?
I was going to ask, does Chuck or Hope do that when Chuck is on Zoom?
You can go ahead, Chuck.
All right, Director Dye.
Here.
Director Marsh.
Here.
Director Clark.
Here.
And is there anyone else on Zoom? I don't think so. So
Nope.
just you three.
Okay, we are expecting Director Grant, but we'll go ahead. If she's more than 10 minutes late, we might be done.
Oh,
Well, no, I think we do need to talk about a few things.
Well, I
So-
have questions on this. So, I don't see any members of the general public, but does anybody have anything that they would like to talk about that is not on tonight's agenda?
I guess I do.
Go ahead, Director Dye.
On Sunday at 11 o'clock, we're having a nature walk in Quarry Park. So we will go up to the Quarry Bowl and walk around and talk about the geology and the history and some of the plants and maybe some birds if we see some.
Great.
So
and look at some rocks.
And
Yeah.
then everybody should just find you in the parking lot at 11 o'clock.
in the park,
In the
yes,
park.
in the park.
Okay. Anything else?
No,
Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 1, consideration of request from the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast, SAM, for approval of a fiscal year 2023-24 budget amendment in the amount of $260,077. But as I read it, it's actually an amendment.
Yeah, I was gonna,
It's the amendment to GCSD is $260,077. The
Right.
total amendment for SAM is $1,365,234.
and that's what we have to approve because we have to
Approve
approve
the
the
SAM budget.
revised SAM budget.
Okay.
was that number 1365?
Yeah,
It's
that's in the agenda memo in the second paragraph.
page, yeah,
I struggle with this sometimes because, like Barbara said, we're approving the broader SAM budget, but our share is only 260,000 only.
okay.
A quarter
Yes.
million dollars. Yeah.
So the number we have to approve is the change to the SAM budget of $1,365,234.
Right. And the reality is what we're approving is the fifth item in the packet, which is the amended SAM budget.
Right.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions because the numbers are not easy to follow. But as
No.
I followed the memo, they originally budgeted the project, the Princeton Pump Station Replacement Project at 1.263181 million. And when they went out to bid, it's higher, 1.637650, which is an additional $374,469. Then it says adding in the additional electrical instrumentation, project management, and engineering costs, it comes up to 2.6 million. And these are the numbers that I have two questions about that. The numbers don't add up to me, and I'll go over that, but am I reading correctly that these additional electrical instrumentation, project management, and engineering costs were not in the original budget in 22-23?
Yes.
21-22.
It says 22-23 in the memo, but in any case,
No, I think that the original budget was 2 years ago that we budgeted with the Princeton Pump Station, correct?
No, it was 22-23.
in any case, that's.
Yeah.
It was, it was 13 months ago.
My question is, so when they budgeted this project, they budgeted for the pump station itself, but not for the engineering, instrumentation, and all the other things that would have been part of the project in any case. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
No,
they budgeted appropriately in the first place.
Part of the reason I included the original budget estimate in the SRT Princeton Pump Station report was they included everything seemingly. So, I get to this weird spot where I can't understand what Sam's doing either. A project's a project and you budget all the costs, right? It doesn't, you don't just budget what someone gives you a price for digging a hole and sticking a package pump station in the ground, obviously. So they should have budgeted for this. When I read that pre-design report or the alternative report, it looks like they budgeted for all that, but then, you know, Nancy, to your point, we talked about this at our last meeting where you weren't there. You know, we start at 1.6 with the contractor's estimate, and then Kishen's memo said 2.2 or 2.3, and then the project data sheet got us up to 2.6. So it's an ever-moving number, and none of it makes sense. And I've given up trying to add up their numbers because a lot of times they don't add up. So
I think, well, my original, I suppose it's a criticism, is that when they budgeted originally, it doesn't appear that they budgeted for the whole project. If now they have to add in the engineering.
and again, when I look at that bid estimate, I'm gonna scroll down here because my printer broke. If I go to page
They make it
page 32 of the agenda,
Yeah,
I mean, that should be the entire budget for the project. You know, they've got a lot of other stuff, and I don't know what electrical they're adding in. And Nancy, for your edification, we just did a project like this down here, coincidentally, and we have a pump station that does about 125,000 gallons a day, dry weather. And the pump station went out. And so what we did is we went in, and to simplify things, we went in, lined the wet well, put 2 submersible pumps in, kind of exactly what they're doing here. And that was done. There was a little bit of electrical work, but it wasn't a lot because, you know, the pump station exists up there right now, right? The electrical's there. Sometimes they have to move things. Sometimes they have to put transfer switches in, things like that. But, you know, the project down here costs $400,000 and we're at 2.6. And as I told Barbara on the phone the other day, you know, I showed this to my engineers and they just kind of laughed. It's like,
because they made it sound like the winning bid raised the cost from the original estimate by $374,000. But in fact, it's a 1.3 million more than what they originally budgeted.
right.
year
And
and a half
when
ago.
you look at the cost estimate, I don't know why all that, and on that page 32, 33 in the agenda, I don't know why all that isn't included. And even still, it's just a fantastically high priced project. But as you opened up this discussion with, you know, we have to do this, sadly enough. We're backed into a corner to some extent.
Right, because we have to replace this pump before.
Right. So basically, you know, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, August 2019, we had that ERF consent decree settlement. And as part of that, we had to do an assessment of the Princeton pump station and the Princeton pump station force main. And that assessment is included in your board packet on the last, whatever, 8 or 10 pages. Once that was in place and they sent that to ERF, it set this in motion. But generally, when you do an alternative analysis like they did with SRT did with this, they have alternatives 1, 2, 3, and 4. You put numbers to them. Because, you know, if alternative 1 costs, I'm going to use a little bit of extreme, $100,000, and alternative 4 costs $3 million, you know, you weigh that as part of your decision of which alternative to go with. And they didn't do that. And here we are. So as I said at our last meeting, generally when a project comes in twice what you budgeted for, you take a step back and do some value engineering and look at it and go, okay, maybe alternative 1 didn't look so bad, or 2 or 3, whatever it may be. So, but that's the spot we're in now.
Okay. Well, on page 9 in our agenda pack, fiscal year 23-24 general budget amendments dated August 15th, 2023. And I assume this came from Sam.
Yes, everything in there is from Sam.
So it has
my memo.
1.6 million, lighting, electrical, 470,000, project management engineering, 250,000, contingency, 25,000, That adds up to 2.382, but the next line says amendment required 2.593 million,
Right.
which is 100,000 more. And the $210,189 more. And there's no explanation where that extra $200,000 came from.
Yes, and that I think is a difference between, and Matthew and I discussed this, between,
Can I just stop, I mean, I think people should be able to see Nancy raising these issues. She is? Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, we don't see it on our screen. They see it
Oh,
on theirs.
okay.
We have the gallery.
Sorry. You're making
Oh.
really great points.
so that's on the big screen?
No, we have the gallery view like we normally do. Barbara just
Oh.
wanted to make sure that the video will show
Right.
us.
Okay. So yes, so Kishan's memo said, hey, we got a bid for $1.6 million, approve the contractor's bid. And then his memo further said, hey, it's going to be $2.3 million once you do the electrical stuff. And then when they release the project data sheet, like I said before, it's 2.6 million. So yes, they don't add up, Nancy, and but I don't know what to tell you at that point.
Yeah, I didn't think math was that hard.
No.
I mean, really, I mean, and I know you, Barbara, in particular, on the finance committee, demand.
I
that
tried.
things add
I
up
keep
and try
trying.
really hard, but this really should be done better.
Yeah,
The numbers
And-
should actually add up.
And Nancy, to your point, we had a managers meeting last week, a couple days before our meeting, and quite honestly, I took Sam and Kishan to task. I said, "This isn't how you do things. We just literally passed a SAM budget a month ago, and now we've got a $1.2 million, $1.3 million, whatever number you want to do, change, and that's not the way it should be." The preliminary design report was done 2 years ago. So in the intervening 2 years from June 2021 till now, it's taken them to design this project and bid it out. And it's like the Montero force main stuff. It's unacceptable, right?
It's
I mean,
more
we
than
had
more than double what they originally budgeted.
more
just
than
to-
double, and they should have been able to, once they did this pre-design report, they should have been able to design this pump station project and bid it out in time for our month ago budget. And they didn't. And I said that to Kishan. I said, we need a better process here. Sticking this in front of us and they just go, well, we need to do a budget amendment. Well, that sounds easy and good, but we have to set rates for this stuff. And Sam doesn't have to do that, obviously, but Montero, Granada, and Half Moon Bay do. And doing a mid-year budget adjustment isn't the way to do it. And it's not a mid-year budget adjustment. It's a 1 month.
Actually, they didn't want to do a mid-year budget adjustment. We forced them to. They wanted to just have it passed by the board and go ahead and approve the contract.
And
That's what they had in mind.
Yeah.
Well, as with so many things, it just
covered.
magically gets covered.
Aeration basin number 4, which wasn't on the budget. It was supposed to cost $500,000 and now it's cost $950,000, right? So yeah. And that was my point in the managers meeting, and it wasn't a pretty managers meeting, but I think I got my point across. We have to do better on this process. This is ratepayer money.
Right, and we know it's not a surprise when the budget has to be developed.
No,
So a project like this, they should have been bidding out in January,
correct, right.
And
not in May or whenever it was.
when I first got on the SAM board, we started talking about the budget process because it was a issue back then. And one of the things that became clear was that we had to do the infrastructure budget first. I mean, and at one point there was a 5-year CIP. As I recall, they were trying to get that passed at the same time as a 1-year CIP, and it was too much. We couldn't do both. And the idea was, well, okay, let's just do 1 year and maybe come back with a 5-year. And we never did. But that's what we need. We need a 5-year CIP. And we also need to figure out a way to pay for things that are not done in 1 year.
Yeah.
I was surprised we got a SAM agenda today. And there's a page in it that's completely mysterious, but it talks about the capitalized, it went through the audits and got the capitalized budgets, which of course doesn't tell you about things like the Princeton pump station where we budgeted 1.3 in the past fiscal year and it hasn't been capitalized, but that money, you know, is supposed to be there
It's supposed to be
because
sitting
we
there.
paid it. But did you know that in 2021, we also in the budget was 1.3 million for the Montero force main? And we must have paid that. Like
But there's
you
no
know,
money, that
there's-
money just,
that money's gone. I
dissipated.
think that's what paid for the upset, the
Yeah, the
BOD
BDO
upset,
yeah.
upset. So we have to move forward now. But, and the good news is that this actually doesn't exceed the cap that we had set. I mean, this is kind of in the, at least in the ballpark of what we had planned to spend. But what it does is push the Montero force main expenses even more into next year because Sam is thinking they're going to come back to us in as soon as the lawsuit is settled, and we're going to be asked for another like $2 million this year just to get started on the Montero force main. And then next year, we're going to have an even bigger hit. So our share of 10 million is 2 million. So they're going to ask for probably 1 million more this year. And then, and I was curious, Chuck, do you have some numbers on our reserves?
Yeah, so I looked at that, Barbara. So we started the year as of July 1 with about 2.36 million in sewer reserves. So, you know, we have money to pay for this and thankfully, you know, we're only 20% of the project. So,
Right.
But yeah, and you just made a statement that this doesn't, so just for the rest of the board, we had kind of on a manager's level, member agency level, we had set a target of $2.5 million a year in CIP. So this does exceed that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we had 1.5 for the emergency generator. We had another 500,000 for the boiler. And then there was one other thing I can't remember off the top of my head, but this does exceed it. And once again, and it's a month after we passed the SAM budget, which was a trying process in and of itself, right? So.
yeah.
Yes.
I struggle to understand why a 5-year, at least look for CIP is so difficult with all, you know, with all the experience they have with that plant and the age of all the stuff in it. But where the agencies have to do 218s and do a multi-year forward-looking
Right.
rates in order to plan for it, even if, you know, there's some wiggle room in each of those years of the 5-year plan. They ought to be able to project that. I mean, they ought to have a strategic plan that looks out more like 10 years.
Yeah.
If you have a strategic plan that looks out 10 years, doing a 5-year CIP is not a difficult thing. If you have no strategic plan and you manage from month to month and maybe year to year, then you're always catching up.
Yeah.
And Nancy, they've had multiple 5-year CIPs, but you know, they change dramatically each 5-year CIP. And I brought this up again at our last budget hearing. You know, no one ever talked about the emergency generator at SAM. And all of a sudden, magically, it popped on this year's budget, and it was not on any other budgets. It's just chaotic. The whole process is chaotic, sadly enough.
I don't see, I agree with both of you strongly about a 5-year CIP, and because the process works like all of a sudden they come up with something like the generator, $1 million, and that's now the high priority.
Yeah.
You've got to do it. And now this.
And the
This
other
is-
things
this
that
is
we
the high
paid for
priority.
get pushed out.
Right. And the other things we already paid for get pushed out. And if they can't prioritize for 5 years out, who's managing what?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a budget problem. We have a management problem.
Yeah, I think so.
And we
Chuck-
paid 1.3 million already for the Princeton pump station. And it's not even in
And
this year's
1.3
budget.
for the Montero force main.
Well, yeah.
And
Yeah, sorry,
The-
Matthew, go
the, I always get nervous when I see these add-ons and they're all these big round numbers with these 3 zeros on the end. Lighting, electric, electrical and instrumentation and control, 470. That just looks to me like a number that just was picked out of the air somewhere. And
I bet they'll spend it.
oh, I'll bet they'll spend it. I bet they more than spend it. But and then when I saw this at Sam as well as here, I immediately next line I circled engineering, and that's 250,000. Project management and engineering. Do you have any idea or did this come up with the agency managers? What does that mean? Engineering when the project's already designed?
No, and what happens at the managers meeting is we're reviewing the next week's agenda, but we don't have anything in front of us. So when I was talking to Maz at Half Moon Bay about this, we don't see, for instance, when we discussed this project, we didn't have the bids in front of us, even though Kishan had gotten them on Tuesday and we were meeting on Wednesday. We didn't have the bids in front of us, and Maz asked for them, and he got kind of a generic, here's what they are. So yes, they add this stuff in. And again, I feel uncomfortable doing this, but we just did this project down here, same size pump station, for $400,000. We utilized an existing wet well, so it's a little different. We didn't excavate. So, excavation in the bid, I went through all the bids. It's $300,000. But we literally just did another project where we dug a big hole and put the prepackaged pump station in. So I can't imagine this would be more than $1 million project, but it is. It's what's in front of us. And Matthew, to your point, if you look at page 33 of the original pre-design report, they have big broad numbers like you're saying. Design 20%. Well, we've already done the design. Legal and admin, 40%. Who's suing us? I'm missing something, right? Now, even with those bloated numbers, the original design bid or the original pre-design estimate was 1.4 million. Take away that craziness, it's 1.1 million.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know how we get to 2.6 million. I just don't get it, and I hate to do this because I didn't design it. I'm not in I haven't reviewed the bid package itself. I looked at the plans. I had my engineers look at the plans. I hate to do this stuff, but it's just $2.6 million for a 100,000 gallon a day pump station. It makes no sense.
Yeah, the pads in there, well, there's a planning level contingency of 30% on page 33, and on the latest
Right.
amendment, there's an additional 10% contingency for 25,000, and I don't know what that's 10% of because it doesn't match any other numbers.
Well,
Right,
and
so they've got 200 grand for contingency, 200 grand basically for design, and 350 grand for legal admin, which shouldn't be there. This should be $1 million project.
Yeah.
Is my bottom line.
Yeah, that's $750,000 in contingency add-ons without
Right.
any specific lines.
Right.
And I have to say that at the meetings, I try to raise a lot of financial issues, as does Matthew, and we get berated by another district for not being supportive of Sam and not caring about the fact that the plant needs upgrades. And
It needs upgrades. It doesn't need slush.
Yeah, and let me yeah.
And I want to address the cap issue. I mean, I think having an agreed upon cap is a very reasonable thing. Like, that's how we plan our fees. We figure it out. Now, next year is going to be high because of the lawsuit and because of the bloated contracts that we're going to have to approve. But so we'll have to do that. But I don't think ongoing, it seems like the expectation is that we sort of write a blank check. Whatever they think they need, we ought to pay for it. And we are failing in our duty if we don't allocate, as much funds as they say they need without any question.
Right.
And that upsets me. Do you agree? That's kind of the attitude?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that's not supposed to be our role as the board of directors to say, okay, rubber stamp, how many millions? Cool.
No, that's your governance is your
represent-
role and asking
Yeah.
questions is your role.
Yeah.
We represent the people of El Granada, you know?
And it's
Yeah.
their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sam is in this good position for them where they don't raise funds, they don't raise rates, they don't, they just say, we have to have this money. And it's completely different, and the three agencies have to face their constituents about it,
But we have,
Half they just recently raised their sewer rates another 13%. And
And the other factor that's out there is that there are people saying, well, if we don't do it now, the costs are going to go up. To which I say, okay, we do have to do these things now because of the lawsuit, but you can't make today's people pay everything for all future needs because the prices are going to go up in the future. You need to do a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
And we need to continue to support, because we all want that plant to run properly.
Absolutely.
We all want to pay for what needs to be paid for.
but that's not signed, you don't have to sign blank checks to do that. And I just want to say, both of you, I really appreciate that you ask questions and push back and look after the ratepayers that way, but also just look after good management that way.
I'd like to bring up a couple other things. This is relatively minor, but on page 9 of our agenda, line 11, it
Yeah.
shows professional membership / fees. I don't know if that's an appropriate place to put this, but that happens to be $35,000 that the settlement has been with ERF has been.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's 20,000 towards the
Right.
RF, 1,000 to the Rose Foundation.
Yeah, and so I thought that the revisions of the settlement that Jeremy was working on, I thought this 35,000 was for the Montara Force Main.
No,
It's so is it for both?
no, it's
It's paying their
It's-
attorney's fees for
yeah.
monitoring our compliance.
And
Right.
to be
Yeah.
fair, they made an agreement. We didn't live up to it. It had to be renegotiated. They want to make sure things get done, and they also want to make sure it doesn't cost them money to make Sam do what they think it ought to do.
Oh, yeah, I understand it more from the ERF standpoint than from ours.
Yeah, but I don't think we can avoid paying it.
No, but I just am wondering that this has covered both parts of that consent decree. And if it
Yes.
doesn't, then I really thought this was going to be monitoring for up in Montara. So if it's for this, then they're going to come back and want some more.
No, this is for the amendment, which they just signed, the negotiated amendment to the ERF agreement. And this is part of the negotiated agreement, that this is the fees that we're going
But
to
that
pay.
changed the time frame
Right.
on Montara. It didn't do anything about the time frame on Princeton.
No, because they're hopefully on track to meet that.
So
This is for Montara, yeah.
But again, can we go
Okay.
backwards, guys? I mean,
yeah,
all this work should have started in August of 2019. Right? That's when the decree was signed. If someone, I've said this before, I just keep repeating myself, sadly enough. I hope I don't bore you, but here's my assessment of the Montara Force Main. Do the first 2,000 feet, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. You could have started work on that in January of 2020, and we didn't. And ERF is, like Matthew said, they're being reasonable, right? They could have said, hey, it's $100,000 for us to extend the deadline for 2 years, and they didn't. But we should have been.
We did it back then. We could have used that $1.3 million, that $1.3 million that we paid.
Yes.
I was so surprised to see that.
yeah.
Yeah, and I look back at that, Barbara, when this came up, and if you'll remember, I sent an email to Kishan and Jeremy back in February this year saying, hey guys, as I read the settlement, the consent decree, we have to replace every stick of the Montara Force Main. And Jeremy wrote back and said, yes, we do. And then what are we waiting for? What have we been waiting for?
Well, I'm hoping things will get better when the lawsuit settlement is finally announced and resolved, so that we don't have this extra whole issue there of the potential for Half Moon Bay not paying for their share. Because that is definitely an issue for, they don't want to approve, they're not approving the Montero Force Main things, which doesn't make sense that they're approving the Princeton pump station under
Right.
protest, but it doesn't matter. It's just, it'll be much better if we're
And
all.
And this came up in the managers meeting, and as I said then, because Montero was saying, we're all in this, part of this, and I said, if we had put forth a budget back in 2020 that said we're going to spend $2 million for the first segment of Montero Force Main, and Half Moon Bay said no, I go, okay, that's on them. But we didn't, and we didn't do it in 2020, 2021, 2022, and we're here now. So
Yeah.
Sam made their bed and we're laying in it.
I agree with you, Barbara, that will help the board's functioning around these things. But I don't see how that precluded Sam from laying out a plan.
No, I agree.
for
It did.
compliance.
I'd like to bring up another point too, the SRT report from 21. This is mentioned on page 29 of our agenda, but it's in the summary as well. It's a geotechnical engineer should conduct a site investigation to determine the depth of liquefiable soil lenses, blah, blah. This could be really bad news. Expensive bad news. Has this study been done? Not that I know of.
Well, they did. So Matthew, I read the soils report. Now I'm going far afield of what my level of expertise is, but as I remember it,
does that equal the geotechnical report?
that's a geotech report. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and when you go through alternatives 1, 2, and 3, they talk about tsunami, liquefaction, and fault rupture. I don't even know what that means.
Earthquake.
I know what fault rupture means, but the odds of the fault hitting the pump station square in the middle are fantastically slim. But if you get tsunami, right? If it floods Princeton, whether we have an old pump station or a new pump station. So number one, they're submersible pumps, so they're designed to be underwater. Now the electrical has to be higher, but number two, if it floods Princeton, there's no one flowing to the Princeton pump station because it's sadly enough been wiped out. I don't even know that the new design addresses liquefaction. If the whole ground shakes and goes liquefied, I don't know what happens to the existing pump station, and I don't know what happens to a new one, but theoretically it's stronger.
I think,
but, again, I looked at that report and I said they had a goal in mind, which was to get a new pump station, and that's kind of what they targeted. That's my honest truth.
Well, I asked the question about the 3 critical weaknesses that were going to be corrected, and was assured at Sam that this new design, and when it's completed, it will solve all 3 of those problems.
Right, and this tsunami, which to me is more likely than not, and I don't even know how likely that is. They're
very unlikely.
They're going to build a knee wall up there. Well, you could build a knee wall around the existing pump station. So, and once again, if you put the electrical high enough, the pumps, if you go to submersible pumps, by definition, they're submersible, they're underwater. So if a big wave comes and goes out, and again, I get too far afield here because I'm not an engineer, and I'm be the first to admit that, but I've talked to my engineers about this stuff, and they looked at it and had the same opinion.
and there is a danger of an earthquake. I mean, we are in an area of a fault zone, and there is a fault that goes right through there.
Yeah.
And if
If there's an earthquake on any of these faults in the system, it's going to affect us, but it's going to affect whatever's there.
Right. Yeah, it's going to affect the pump station, the force main, the Portola pump station, the treatment plant, the IPS. We'll keep going, right? So.
All right. Well, I mean, I move approval.
Because we don't really have another option.
No, I mean, we really do need, we're under a lawsuit, a settlement, and we have to do this. I move approval of the budget amendment for Sam in the amount of $1,365,234 with our portion at 20%. more or less of that. Are we at 20 or 19 something?
We're at nine, so our portion is 260,077.
With our amount at 2,670.
Second,
I was gonna say with palpable disgust, I will say.
I think my disgust has already been palpable.
Yes, indeed.
Can we have a roll call?
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Marsh,
Aye.
and Director Dye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0 with palpable.
Discussed. Okay, second agenda item, much happier. Consideration of the community emergency response team's use of the Granada Community Park property on September 23rd for the CERT annual shakeout event, where CERT volunteers will set up a shade structure and tables in the parking lot and be on site from 9 to 1 to share information about CERT. I wonder if they can't use the fire station now for some reason.
I think they want it to be more visible.
More in
They
the,
want
in
it.
the open space.
I move to approve this. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm wondering if I should abstain because my husband made the request.
You can't.
You can't, because otherwise we're gonna have a quorum.
All right. And actually, there's really no conflict.
Yeah, there's no.
It's just a request from him. All right. I always want to be careful about that, but in this case, I really don't think there is any kind of conflict
I'll second
whatsoever.
just to make sure.
Well, there's no attorney on the line, so we're good.
Thank you for your transparency, but I'm
Yes.
actually a member of CERT myself.
Yes, yes. And they're completely independent of me. I have nothing to do with CERT except me married to a CERT guy.
We have,
Well, and honestly, Hope asked me about this. She said, do we have to put this on the agenda? And I said, historically, we've put events that go onto the park property on the agenda, but as I joke about, I could also just approve it myself and you could fire me if you don't like it. Right? So
No, we appreciate that. I think it's good for us to know
just
what's
for
happening.
visibility.
And it kind of occurred to me that we might want to consider creating some guidelines that the board could approve the guidelines, and then
then
that
we
way
don't
I
have
would
to
be
do-
free to make those decisions as long as they follow within the
That's
guidelines.
a great idea.
For use
Yes.
of district property.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but they're not.
Including this, including this room, including the parking lot down there by the skate ramp, all of that. So.
Yeah, that's actually a really great idea.
I think that's a good idea. And it's good to know that Hope's in her second meeting and she's consolidating power already. I like that.
I would really like to see that.
Except for the roll call.
I should have seen the timeline and brochure that she did for the recreation projects.
Yes.
Goes, Pat and I thank you. Okay, roll call on that one.
Okay, Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Marsh,
Aye.
and Director Dye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 3-0.
No other items on the special agenda. We are adjourned.
All right.
Nice job.
Thanks, everybody.
Did you beat